Just a chart to introduce myself. My name is Gabriele. I currently work as project manager at Namirial, an IT company based in Italy, where I am involved in iOS and Android projects. Also, I am a community lead at GDG in Ancona. So, before starting, I would like to ask you this question. How many of you have used open source library in your project? Please hand up. Thanks. Thank you. So, I think that many of us know some names in this chart. This is a subset of very popular libraries in Android universe. And I would like to talk about some important points about the use of an open source library in a project, especially in a project, in a real project, in an enterprise project, where you have to talk with a customer or enterprise customer. If you need an example, we can talk about a floating action button, for example. It is a core element in the material design. However, we don't have official code, so you have two alternatives. You can use an open source, or you can write your code. What's about the first case? The first point can be obvious, but when you have very short time, usually you open GitHub and you find a library and use it. My tip about it is you should try more libraries with the same feature, and you should choose the best code for your project. There isn't a best code. There is the best code for your project, for your needs. Then, read the license. I will talk about this point in the next chart. It's the real main point. You can't use all libraries in your project. You have to check the license under which the library is released. Then, check the README file. Usually, in the README file, you can find some point about the use, about the features, about the integration of these libraries, so you can check if the libraries have the feature that you need. Finally, this is my personal checklist when I decided to use an open source library. First of all, the license. Then the maintenance, the kind of support that you can find, the documentation, and finally the quality of code. Usually, when my team decides to use a license, an open source libraries in a real project, we check these points to be sure that we can use these libraries and in a good way. I think that everybody knows this point. Open source doesn't mean free. Open source doesn't mean that you are free to do anything you want with the library. Pay attention to this point. You can have legal issues about the license. I don't want to talk about the type of license, but if you don't know well the difference between licenses, you should read something about it. The real question about the license is, can I use it? You should check the license under which the library is released, and you should check if this type of license is compatible with your project. This means that not of all kind of licenses can be used, it can be good for your project. It is not a joke. The license is real, and you can have legal issues if you don't respect the license under which it's released. I don't know if you know about the strong copyleft license. For example, an example of this type of license is the GPL, especially the GPL v3. It is known as reciprocal license, also known as a viral license. What does it mean? You have to release your project with the same kind of license. When you are doing a project for a customer or enterprise project, you have to be sure that you can release your project with this type of license. So pay attention to use an open source with a GPL license. There are some other types of license. The most libraries on GitHub, for example, is released with Apache license. It means that you can do everything with this code. You can use the code as is, but pay attention because you don't have any kind of support. It is a recent history. I don't know if you know about Telegram Plus. It is an application that was published and then was removed from Google Play for violation of intellectual properties. I read a lot of posts and blog about this situation. And I found a lot of comments with the same sentence. Something like, Telegram is open source. What's wrong if someone uses this code to build someone else? So pay attention because in this case Telegram is released with GPL Voodoo Plus, and this means that you can do everything with the code, but you have to make it available if someone asks you, or in alternative you can publish all the code. It is another point. Do you know the author of the library? The question is, who is maintaining the library? A company, a community, or a single developer? In my experience, I prefer the first and the second option, and I will explain this point in the last chart in my presentation. When you are using, or we are going to use a library, you should check if the library is still alive. In GitHub, for example, there are a lot of libraries, but not all these libraries are alive. What can you do to know if the library is alive? For example, you can check the last commit in the repository, in the dev branch or main master branch. If the last commit was 1 year ago, maybe the author has left from the project. Also, you can check how often the project is updated, because if someone is using the library, maybe is updating the same code that he is using. I think that it is an important point. You should not use a library if it is not long maintained. You should, if you are using this kind of library, maybe it can be a good choice to leave the library and to change your code. The support. The real question in this case is, can someone help me? You should, when you are using something, you should evaluate if someone can help you. You should evaluate what kind of support you can find using the libraries. The popular libraries usually have a tag on Stack Overflow. Someone has a G+ community, or a very good section about issues and about questions. Issues. Maybe libraries can be updated often, but you should check if someone is fixing the issues. For example, in GitHub, you can check the number of issues open and closed. If you find 3,300 issues open and only one closed, it's not a good evidence for these libraries. So stay away from this kind of library. How I can use the library? What does it mean? You can use the best libraries in the world, but if this library is not well documented, you can't use it. You will not be able to use it in a good way. So check if the library provides a doc section, a wiki section, or for short libraries, for little libraries, maybe you can find a good README where you can find a lot of info about the use or example or code that you can, from which you can understand all the features that the library supports. Another kind of support can be the demo. A lot of libraries has a demo. Maybe it's a good way if the demo is published on Google Play. It is the best way to see and to check the feature that the libraries can support. It is an important point. Test is a must for all the projects. So test is a must also for the libraries. You should check if the libraries that you are using have a unit test. I noticed that very few libraries have a unit test. Why this happens? The unit test requires time, requires resources. So if the author of an library is a single developer, maybe you will not find a unit test. Maybe if the author is a community or a large company, for example, the Square, you will find a very good unit test inside the library. It is very important because in any time you can build the project and you can check if the tests are successful. Finally, check the quality of the code. It is not simple to check the code written by other developers, but I suggest you spending a few hours to browse the code, to check how the code is written, because if you have to change something inside the libraries, if you have to add some feature, you should be able to change the code and you should be able to understand what the library is doing in this point of the code. If the author doesn't use comments, Javadoc, maybe you will find some problem to change the code if you need to change. Integration. What does it mean? Today, a library must have a Gradle support. As you know, Android switches to Android Studio, and Android Studio is based on a Gradle system, is a build system. And if you find a library that can be good but don't have a Gradle support, you should open an issue in GitHub, for example, and ask the author to push this artifact on Maven. It's very simple to push an artifact on Maven today, so I think that every library must have this kind of support. Continuous integration. To be honest, I am not sure about the real pronunciation in English of this type of service. I think that it is Travis CI. How many of you know about continuous integration? So, in the last task of Yahoo, the author speak about continuous integration. It's a very, very important today for a team to have this kind of support. Continuous integration can be a good way to check if the library can be built in this time Also, with a continuous integration system, you can run the test inside the library. It's very important to know if the library is this version of the library in this time can be built. Finally, when you decide to use open source, you should check this question. Are you ready for this? Are you ready for this? This can be happen. So, the real question is, are you ready to explain to your customer that a part of your project is no longer maintained? It can happen, and it can be not a very good day for you. Everybody can write a library, but everybody can leave the project. The alternative of use an open source is write a code, our own code. Before writing a custom code, this is my personal checklist. In these cases, you should check if you really need this code. What does it mean? You need a custom code to build a pattern that maybe it doesn't exist in the official code. Do you really need to build this pattern? Can you build the project without this kind of pattern? Don't reinvent the wheel. It's simple. For example, if you need a code that downloads an image, cache the image, and put the image in image view, please don't write a custom code. There are a lot of libraries, very popular libraries that can do it in a very good way. Can you build a custom code in a short time? Time means cost. Do you have the time to build a code that have the same features that you can find inside the libraries, for example? Do you have the skill to build the code? Maybe you can be not able to build this kind of pattern or this kind of feature. There are some pros and some cons about the use of custom code. First of all, it is your code, so you can do all with your code. You can change the code, you can add new feature, you can do everything. You are without license and royalty costs, for example. On the other hand, it can require time. It means that it requires resources and maybe an extra budget. Check if you have this extra budget in terms of time and in terms of cost. So, it is the situation, but it could not be simple to choose between an open source or your custom code. Before I finish my presentation, I would like to share with you my personal experience about open source. It was an incredible experience for me. I learned a lot of things about the use of the open source libraries. About 2 years ago, I decided to share a libraries with others. When I decided to do it, I could not expect this. Today, one of my library, its name is Carslib, has about 3,000 stars on GitHub. I think that is a good result for Android libraries. This is the steps that I followed to share my libraries 2 years ago. First of all, the idea. I have the idea to collect my ideas, my code, my example, put all the code together, and I realized that this code was good to use, but not was good to publish for others. Because writing for others is different from writing from themselves. You have to write a lot of comments, Java doc. You have to try to do your library in a best way, in a clean way. You have to do some abstraction because you don't know how the other people can use your library, in which way they will use your library. Then, a library is never finished. A day, I decided to publish the library. And I post a blog, I publish a demo on Google Play, and I try to share my project with other people, with my friends, with my circles. And I was very surprised about the result. I did not expect what happened. I received a lot of mail, a lot of pull requests, issues, messages, Hangout, chats. I was surprised, but it was the problem. Too many requests, too many mails, too many Hangouts. Hey, sir, can you add this feature? Hey, sir, can you change this code? Hey, sir, why don't you do this? Okay. It doesn't mean that I am leaving my project, but it means that I took a break. And now I can understand why a day you can find deprecated in a library. It is the main reason for which I prefer that the author of the library is a company or a community, because a single developer maybe can leave the project one day. Thank you for your attention.